From shrunken physiques to career changes, from getting arrested to battling addiction, these are former WWE wrestlers you won't recognize today. Starting with one of the biggest stars of the mid-2000s. Dave Batista didn't even start wrestling until he was 30 years old. He'd grown up poor in Washington, D.C., gotten into trouble as a teenager, and found his way out through bodybuilding and eventually professional wrestling. He won the 2005 Royal Rumble and then won his first world title at WrestleMania 21. What followed was a lengthy title reign, multiple pay-per-view main events, and a run as one of WWE's two biggest babyfaces alongside John Cena. He retired for good after losing to Triple H at WrestleMania 35. But long before that final match, the transition to Hollywood was already well underway. His first significant acting work came in Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014, where he played Drax the Destroyer. Nobody expected much from a wrestler cast in a Marvel film, but what they got was genuinely funny, and a character that became one of the MCU's most beloved. He reprised the role across all three Guardians films, through the Avengers crossovers, and completed his run with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Beyond Marvel, he's been in Spectre, Blade Runner, and other notable movies. He's visibly leaner than his wrestling days. If you passed him on a street without context, you might recognize the face, but struggle to place where you knew him from. The Batista who powerhoused people into oblivion is gone. Dave Batista, the actor, has taken his place. But after Batista stopped being an active wrestler, Vince tried to have another powerhouse fill the void. When Mason Ryan showed up on Raw in January 2011, the reaction was immediate. People genuinely thought they were watching the debut of Batista's twin. Punk brought him into the new Nexus, and for a brief window, Ryan felt genuinely threatening. He entered the Royal Rumble, he was feuding with Randy Orton, and crowds were paying attention. But the problem became obvious quickly. Mason Ryan had the look, but he didn't have the other things that turn a physical specimen into an actual star. The charisma wasn't there. The mic work wasn't there. And in a company where you need all three pieces to break through, being jacked simply wasn't enough. People started noticing he moved and carried himself a lot like Batista, except none of the other qualities that made Batista work. By 2012, he was barely being used on television. WWE shuffled him back down to NXT in 2013, where he had a brief feud with Enzo Amore and Big Cass. His final televised match came in April 2014, and 2 weeks later, he got released from his contract. So where is he now? Nowhere near a wrestling ring. In January 2016, Mason Ryan announced on social media that he had joined Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas as the chief archer in their long-running show at the MGM Grand. WWE actually helped connect him with the audition, which is an odd footnote to a complicated relationship. And honestly, the transition makes sense. The physical presence that wrestling could never fully harness turned out to be exactly what Cirque needed. His Instagram describes him as a real estate investor, Cirque du Soleil performer, and mindset coach. A quiet, settled life, a long way from the chaos of Monday Night Raw. But switching gears, let's talk about one of the most drastic body transformations in wrestling history. Remember this guy? The party animal with the exotic express, always surrounded by his crazy rosebuds. He had that lean, almost skinny physique, the soul patch, and that whole eccentric vibe that was honestly pretty entertaining, even if WWE never knew what to do with him. Well, fast forward to today, and Adam Rose looks like he could bench press a small car. We're talking about an 80-pound muscle gain that transformed him from party boy to absolute unit. The guy went from weighing around 210 pounds during his WWE run to a jacked 258 pounds of pure muscle. It's like someone took the old Adam Rose and fed him nothing but protein shakes and dumbbells for 5 years straight. But here's the real story behind this transformation, and it's actually pretty heavy. Rose has been incredibly open about his struggles with drug addiction during his WWE days, revealing that at his worst, he dropped down to just 176 pounds and was living on basically one smoothie a day. After getting clean with help from WWE's rehab program, he completely dedicated himself to getting healthy again. Now he's got the physique of a bodybuilder and says he's never felt better. This next one's going to be tough to talk about, but we've got to address the elephant in the room with Sunny. Back in the 90s, Tammy Sytch was absolutely everywhere in WWE. And I mean everywhere. She was the golden girl of the company. And let's be real, she was stunning. WWE was so obsessed with her that she became the most downloaded woman on the entire internet back in 1996. Sunny had this perfect blonde bombshell look that just screamed 90s wrestling glamour. She was confident, charismatic, and honestly knew how to work a crowd better than most wrestlers. For a while there, it seemed like she could do no wrong, and WWE was building their women's division around her star power. But here's where things get really sad. The real-life Tammy Sytch has been through an absolute nightmare over the past decade. We're talking multiple arrests, DUI charges, and court appearances that show someone who looks completely different from the WWE superstar we remember. The most serious incident happened in 2022 when she was involved in a fatal car crash while allegedly driving under the influence. Her recent mugshots and court photos are honestly heartbreaking. It's like looking at a completely different person. It's a reminder that behind all the glitz and glamour, real people are dealing with real struggles. Snitsky made his main roster debut in 2004 and got into a feud with Kane. For a while, Snitsky was genuinely over, but WWE had no long-term plan for him. He bounced from match to match, always on the edges, without any clear direction. By 2007, he got a bizarre character overhaul, shaved head, no eyebrows, yellow teeth, and was repackaged as a silent psycho on ECW. It looked creepy on paper, and on TV, it went nowhere. He was quietly released in December 2008. Today, Snitsky runs a military and survival gear store called Priority One Surplus in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. He's told on podcasts that he's been at it for around 9 years and loves it. He still pops up occasionally on the independent scene and made 2 appearances for MLW in 2023. His Instagram shows a guy who's in great shape, proud of his Pennsylvania roots, and living a very normal life, far removed from the days of kicking rubber babies. Up next is a transformation that'll completely mess with your head. Remember this absolute monster from SmackDown? Vladimir Klov was billed as this unstoppable Russian machine, built like a tank, and had this dead serious, no-nonsense attitude that made him genuinely intimidating. WWE pushed him as this unbeatable force who could steamroll through anyone, and honestly, with that look, you believed it. Klov had this very specific appearance: the short hair, the clean shave, the intense stare, and an intimidating physique. He was part of some decent storylines too, feuding with The Undertaker and Triple H, and later became part of that weird but entertaining duo with Santino Marella. But even when he was doing comedy, that imposing physical presence never went away. But here's where it gets wild. Fast forward to today, and Vladimir Klov looks like a completely different person. The guy has grown a full beard, gotten completely shredded, and has this modern appearance that's the polar opposite of his WWE character. He's been working as a trainer and doing some acting, but if you saw him at a coffee shop, you'd not even recognize him as the guy who once terrorized SmackDown. It's honestly one of the most dramatic character-to-real-life transformations I've ever seen. Bull Nakano was absolutely terrifying back in the 90s, and I mean that in the best possible way. When Bull Nakano stepped into the WWE ring in 1994, she looked like she could literally eat her opponents for breakfast. We're talking about this massive, colorful hair that was styled straight up like a weird mohawk, intimidating face paint that made her look like a warrior, and this presence that made even the toughest wrestlers look twice. Nakano was legitimately one of the most dominant women's wrestlers of all time. She had this whole punk rock aesthetic mixed with traditional Japanese wrestling intensity that was unlike anything WWE fans had ever seen. Her feuds with Alundra Blaze were absolutely brutal, and honestly, she made everyone else on the women's roster look like they were playing dress-up. The woman was a legitimate monster in the ring, and that wild appearance just added to the whole package. But here's where it gets crazy. After retiring from wrestling in 1997, Bull Nakano completely reinvented herself and became a professional golfer. The woman who used to terrorize wrestling rings now spends her time on golf courses, and the transformation is absolutely mind-blowing. Gone is the crazy upward hair and face paint, replaced by a much more traditional flowing hairstyle and a completely different physique. She looks like someone's sweet aunt who might bring you cookies, not someone who could powerbomb you through a table. Speaking of dramatic body transformations, let's talk about Spike Dudley. And this one hits different because Spike was honestly one of the most lovable underdogs in wrestling history. This guy was the heart and soul of ECW's hardcore scene, and when he made it to WWE, he brought that same scrappy energy that made fans absolutely love him. Floppy blonde hair that looked like he just rolled out of bed, a scruffy goatee, and those iconic glasses held together with tape. Spike's whole appeal was that everyman look. He wasn't the biggest, strongest, or most athletic guy on the roster, but he had more heart than wrestlers twice his size. Watching him take insane bumps and keep coming back for more was pure wrestling magic. Plus, being the little brother of the Dudley boys gave him this perfect underdog story that fans ate up. But when Spike resurfaced a few years ago for a Dudley Boys reunion, wrestling fans did a literal double take. Gone was the shaggy-haired, tape glasses-wearing underdog. Instead, we got a completely bald Spike with a salt and pepper goatee that made him look like a distinguished businessman. Turns out that's exactly what he became. The guy left wrestling to become a financial advisor. It's wild how someone can go from looking like a college dropout to looking like the guy who handles your retirement planning. But perhaps the most shocking transformation was made by none other than Tyler Rex. Back in the day, Tyler Rex had this super intimidating look that made him stand out on the roster. Flowing dreadlocks, a tall, imposing frame, and this whole tough guy persona that worked really well. He had a solid tag team run with Kurt Hawkins and that brutal-looking burning hammer finisher that made fans wince every time he hit it. The look was unique, the wrestling ability was there, and WWE seemed to be building something with him. But in 2012, he made the decision to step away from wrestling to focus on his family and start some business ventures, including a fitness company. At the time, it seemed like a pretty standard choosing family over career story that we see sometimes in wrestling. But here's where this story becomes really unique. In 2021, the person who wrestled as Tyler Rex came out as a transgender woman and is now known as Gabby Tuft. Gabby has been incredibly open about her journey and has received amazing support from the wrestling community. However, in stark contrast to Gabby, who completely changed her life, some wrestlers ended up ruining their lives with one mistake and never recovered. And if you want to find out what happened to every forgotten WWE wrestler, check out this video next.